Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Rivals of Ixalan spoilers. So it's day number 3 of 5 for Rival spoilers, and oh my god, do we have a lot to talk about, tons of mythics, tons of rares, some sweet commons and uncommons. This set is bonkers, the spoiler season is insane, so altogether, this means we better jump into it or we're going to have like a 3-hour long spoiler video today. Like to avoid that if possible. So first off, we got a new mythic. We actually have several today, but we're starting off with Ezzor the Lawbringer, some Ravnica flavor seeping over into Ixalan, and this card is pretty absurd. So 6 mana, including 2 white and 2 blue, you get a 6/6 flyer when it enters the battlefield. Each opponent actually, can't cast instants or sorceries during that player's next turn, and when it attacks, you can pay X white and blue. You draw X cards, you gain X life. So this is essentially a Sphinx's revelation on a stick with some weird protective upside of keeping your opponent from casting sorcery speed removal to kill it. Reminds me a little bit of Consecrated Sphinx. Not a great comparison because Consecrated Sphinx is free. Once you get it out, you just start drawing cards. You gotta pay for Ezzor the Lawbringer, but the ability to repeatedly Sphinx's revelation when you attack is absolutely absurd. Only 1 or 2 activations for like 7 mana, 8 mana, which you should have because Ezzor costs 6 mana anyway, so on curve you're going to be able to draw 4, gain 4 the next turn when you attack, is enough to close out the game. So I am super excited for Ezzor. I think that in Standard, I don't know where this fits. I'm not super excited for Standard. It could end up being really good. The big problem I see with it is, as a finisher, Ezzor is a little bit more fragile than Approach of the Second Sun. Approach is really hard to deal with. Ezzor dies to removal, so you're not really guaranteed to close out the game as you are with Approach. Also, playing Ezzor in your approach deck turns on creature removal, which you kind of want to blank in your approach deck. The other thing is, we have like Pull from Tomorrow is a huge card draw spell, while Sphinx's Revelation is better than Pull from Tomorrow. Pull from Tomorrow has the upside of not having the timing restriction. The problem with Ezzor's Sphinx's Revelation ability is you got to play it as a sorcery, essentially, when you attack with it. Pull from Tomorrow, you can just do it your opponent's end step. However, where I am unreasonably excited about Ezzor is as a commander. This might be my favorite commander printed in a long time. It does everything I want to do. It makes the opponents miserable with the enter the battlefield trigger that you can Venser and you can momentary blink to keep repeatedly doing. Just lock instants and sorceries of your opponents out of the game altogether. And then it draws you cards and it gains you life, so that keeps you alive while you're playing your jank, while you're dirtling around. So I think that Ezzor might be my favorite commander card. So overall, super good for commander. I can't wait to build around Ezzor in commander. It is everything I want in a general for a commander deck. For Standard, we'll have to wait and see. 6/6 flying for 6 is good stats. I just don't know if it gets overshadowed by other options. I think there's a chance, but where I'm certainly excited is for commander decks. Next on our list, we got another mythic, Polyraptor. 8 mana, you get a 5/5, which doesn't look that exciting. However, it has a really crazy enrage ability. Whenever it's dealt damage, you create a token that is a copy of Polyraptor. So you can make an entire board full of raptors if you can keep damaging your Polyraptor over and over again. As far as comparisons, Polyraptor reminds me a little bit of like Giant Adaphage, of Spawnwraith, green creatures that have the ability to copy themselves, but there's a huge difference here. Giant Adaphage makes a copy when it deals combat damage, and then the next turn, if you get to attack with both, you'll combat damage both, you get 2 copies. Spawnwraith, same type of thing, really slow to spiral out of control. It can spiral out of control if you keep getting in combat damage. Polyraptor speeds up this process significantly because you don't have to deal damage with it. So if you have the right pieces on the battlefield when you play your Polyraptor, things can get really crazy really quick. So in Standard, probably the best way to abuse Polyraptor is fight effects. Kill one of your opponent's things, also get another Polyraptor, keep fighting, keep getting more dinosaurs. I don't think that Polyraptor is super exciting for Standard though. As an 8 mana 5/5, you need a lot to go right for it to really be good. We have some really powerful dinosaurs at 6, 7, 8 mana, and I'm not sure that Polyraptor really competes there, even though if it sticks around, it can spiral out of control. What I want to do with Polyraptor, though, is play some fun commander decks, play some fun casual decks. One of the sweetest combos is Pyrohemia or Pestilence, which are basically repeatable ways to damage our Polyraptor. So here's what happens. Let's say we get down our Pyrohemia, get down our Pestilence, either one, doesn't really matter. We get down our Polyraptor, we activate Pyrohemia once, we ping all of our creatures for 1, which means we get another Polyraptor. So now we have 2 Polyraptors. Then we activate Pyrohemia again, we ping it again, we go from 2 Polyraptors up to 4 Polyraptors. The next one, each of those Polyraptors makes a Polyraptor, so we're up to 8, then 16, then 32. Eventually we start killing off the first Polyraptors with our Pyrohemia damage, but by that point it doesn't matter because we're making so many Polyraptors, so it just grows exponentially with each mana. We also can do some sweet pinging stuff with Blasting Station. This doesn't actually make infinite raptors because you gotta sack a creature, but you can sack a creature to ping Polyraptor, to make a raptor, which untaps Blasting Station, to ping the raptor, to make another raptor, to sack the raptor, to ping the raptor, to sack the raptor. So you basically get infinite death triggers, infinite enter the battlefield triggers. So I think that's where we'll see Polyraptor, is some janky build around dinosaur commander decks doing some really crazy things. I can imagine on Commander Clash, things getting really out of control with a Polyraptor dinosaur deck. As far as standard, I don't think it's big enough. I think it's too slow, but a really fun card nonetheless. We also have some rares that are kinda, they're alright. Primal Storm, the red Elder Dinosaur rare, is another fun commander card. When it attacks, you get to exile the top card of each player's library. You can cast any number of non-land cards exiled that way without paying their mana cost. So that's your library, all of your opponent's libraries. In Commander, that's like 4 free cards for your attack. Maybe you're hitting huge Eldrazi, some ramp spells, some card draw. Really good things to hit there. In Standard, a little less exciting. You attack with it. Maybe you're hitting a Attune with Ether and a Servant of the Conduit. That's still fine value, but it's not that exciting. It's going to die in combat, going to die to removal, so I think it's more of a commander card. Golden Guardian, on the other hand, is just really unique. I have no idea how to evaluate this card, so you get a 2/2 for 4, you can pay 2 and fight another creature you control. You can't fight your opponent's creatures, and then when Guardian dies, it comes back onto the battlefield as a land that can tap to add 2 mana of any one color, or pay 4 and tap it to make a 4/4 Golem artifact creature token. So my guess would be this is just too much work to really be good. You gotta play your 4/4, you gotta have 2 mana to fight, you gotta hope you don't die to a Magma Spray or a Lightning Strike in response to the fighting. So there's a lot of ways that this can go wrong, and while the payoff is good, making a 4/4 for 4 repeatedly is certainly strong. It's still a little bit slow, so we'll have to see. Maybe there's some crazy deck that can make use of it, but I just don't know how to evaluate it, because it's one of the weirder flip cards we've seen. Stuff like Search for Iskanta, pretty straightforward. You mill cards, you flip it. You lose life, you flip your Arguel's Bloodfast. This one is just very weird. It's on a fragile creaturey body that's pretty overcosted for its actual ability, but if you get to flip it around, it can be pretty strong. Next up, we have World Shaper, another Merfolk, and this card is pretty interesting. 4 mana, you get a 3/3. When it attacks, you get to mill 3 cards from your library to your graveyard. When it dies, you get to reanimate all of your lands. So this is basically a creaturey, Merfolky version of Splendid Reclamation. Obviously, there's some downsides. You gotta have a creature that dies to get the trigger. You can't just cast it like a Splendid Reclamation. But there's upsides as well, because it's milling those cards, filling your graveyard, so it kind of fuels itself. I think the most exciting aspect of this is, in Modern, it gives you redundancy with Splendid Reclamation. One of the problems with playing Splendid Valakut, or trying to assemble the Maze's End win with Splendid Reclamation and just milling all your lands into your graveyard, is sometimes you don't draw your Splendid Reclamation. By having 8 Splendid Reclamations, assuming you can find a way to continually kill your World Shaper when you need to, makes that a much more reliable plan than it was before. So, cool card, not sure about Standard, seems like it's probably not going to show up too much as a Hill Giant, but can do some cool janky combo things in Modern. Admirals Orders is our newest cancel, and I don't really like this card. I mean, it's fine. You get a literal cancel, 3 mana counter spell, has raid where you can cast it for 1 mana. So 99% of the time, you just get a cancel. I think this has less upside than disallow and some of the other counters in the format. On the other hand, if you are exactly countering something like Settle the Wreckage for 1 mana, then Admiral's Orders can be pretty reasonable. So maybe it's a sideboard option. The good news is cancel isn't that far away from being standard playable. 3 mana counters are kind of where we're at. strat. If everyone's playing Settle the Wreckage or there's other stuff that's being played during your combat phase when you're attacking, Admirals Orders can be a better option. So we'll have to see. Overall, I think it's mostly a cancel, though, so evaluate it in the context of being a cancel with a very slight upside in very specific situations. Next on our list, we have Dead Man's Chest, which is a really interesting enchantment. 2 mana, you enchant a creature an opponent controls. When that creature dies, you get to exile cards equal to its power from the top of its owner's library, and then you can cast a non-land card from among them for as long as it remains exiled. You can spend mana as though it was mana of any type. Basically, this is a enchantment. You put it on your opponent's big creature, you kill their creature, you get one of their cards for free. I think this is mostly a casual card, a commander card. Gonti is a really cool build around me commander. Dead Man's Chest fits perfectly there. You can play it with like send triplets with your Gonti and just play the steal all your opponent's stuff deck. You can even try to build that deck in standard, although how good it is will depend mostly on what you're playing against. If your opponent's playing a bunch of red 1-drops, stealing them with Dead Man's Chest and Gonti isn't that exciting. If your opponent's got a lot of really powerful Scarab Gods and so forth, then stealing them becomes a little bit more appealing. So I don't know, maybe it's something we could do for like budget Magic. I don't think it's a competitive plan for standard, but it feels like a blast to play in Gonti decks and triplet decks in Commander. We also got Sphinx's Decree, and I don't even know what to make of this card. 2 mana sorcery, each opponent can't cast instants or sorcery spells during that player's next turn. It's like the world's worst or weirdest silence, essentially. You gotta play it during your turn. In theory, you keep your opponent from casting that approach to the second suns the next turn, from storming off the next turn. But in Modern, I think you just play silence. It seems close to strictly better than Sphinx's Decree, because it shuts down all spells, not just instants and sorceries. So I don't know, maybe there's some specific spell-based combo that this is going to be important for fighting against in Standard, but I don't see it right now. So as for right now, I think it's an interesting card. I wish it said like draw a card on it or something, would make it a little bit more playable as something you could just main deck, but I think it's one of those weird safety valve cards. Maybe there's some crazy storm mechanic that we don't know about where this is going to be important to Standard. But as for right now, I think this is just a really weird silence that probably doesn't do much of anything. We also got Silent Gravestone, and this looks like a bad hate card, but it's actually pretty sweet. So for 1 mana, you get an artifact that makes it so cards in graveyards can't be the targets of spells or abilities, and then for 4 mana, you exile Silent Gravestone and all cards from all graveyards, and you draw a card. So Silent Gravestone is good against some stuff. It's good against Scarab God, good against Torrential Gear Hulk, for example. Things where your opponent is targeting specific cards in a graveyard. On the other hand, it's not good against some stuff. If your opponent's getting back Earthshaker Kenras with Eternal Eyes, if they're casting Aftermath cards, then Silent Gravestone doesn't really do anything. So as a graveyard hate spell, I'm not sure this actually ranks ahead of Crook of Condemnation or some of the other options in Standard. Might be a little bit far down the list. One thing I love about this card, though, is you can actually use it in Modern proactively to protect your graveyard stuff. So let's say you're dredging and worried about your opponent surgically extracting your prized amalgams, or you're playing Living End and you're afraid Fairy Macabre is going to get rid of your threats. Silent Gravestone makes it so your opponent can't target your stuff in the graveyard with their surgical extraction. They can't eat your pieces one by one with Relic. They'd have to sack it and nuke everything all at once. So you could use this proactively as a way to protect your graveyard stuff from targeted abilities, and you can still dredge your stuff back into the graveyard. You can still play a land and get back your blood gas. It's not preventing that from happening. So there might be some potential in specific graveyard decks to use this offensively to protect their decks from their opponent's graveyard disruption, depending on what graveyard hate is seeing play in the format. So even though I think this is probably second tier graveyard hate, most likely in Standard, although it depends on the meta. If all you're scared about is Scarab God and Torrential Gear Hulk, then it's probably great. But if God Pharaoh's Gift is still a big deck, if Aftermath and Eternalizer are still big decks, then Silent Gravestone I don't think does enough with the 4 activated cost, but a really cool unique take on graveyard hate for the format. We also got a cycle of really sweet uncommons, the Forerunner Cycle. So these cards are basically like the Harbinger Cycle from Lorwyn, where when you have them enter the battlefield, you get to tutor up a card of a specific type, shuffle, put it on top of your library. All of these also come with an upside, which is pretty cool. So Forerunner of the Heralds, for example, lets you tutor for a Merfolk. You get a 3/2 for 4, and then whenever another Merfolk enters the battlefield, you get a counter on your Forerunner of the Heralds. Forerunner of the Empire tutors up a Dinosaur, can do some pinging of your dinosaurs for Enrage. Forerunner of the Coalition tutors up a Pirate, and Forerunner of the Legion tutors up a Vampire. Also has some interesting abilities. The Pirate one in specific drains your opponent for 1 every time a Pirate enters the battlefield. That is a pretty strong ability and offers a bit of reach to the Pirate deck. So I think that the two of these that I'm most excited about are Forerunner of Coalition, the Pirate option, just because it lines up really well on curve and it has the best ability, secondary ability, of any of the Forerunner cycles. So you play this on 3, you can get a Hostage Taker to make sure you have it for turn 4. Also potentially makes Admiral Brass an option. Admiral Bucket Brass is not a card you can really play 3 or 4 of because of the legendary problem. However, it's a really sweet one of in a pirate deck, so the ability to play Forerunner of the Coalition, normally tutor up Hostage Taker, but in specific situations grab a one of Admiral Bucket Brass seems really powerful for an aggro mid-range Grixis pirate deck, and then the ability to just drain the opponent out is all upside for the evasive tricky pirates. The other one that deserves mentioning is Forerunner of the Legion, specifically because it works well with Oketra's Monument. Oketra's Monument, make sure you have your Legion's Conquistador. Conquistador, get more Conquistador, make a ton of tokens, overrun your opponent with Oketra's Monument value. So while the whole cycle is fine, I think the white and black members of the cycle are the two best of the bunch. Next, we have a bunch more interesting uncommons. Cherished Hatchling, 2 mana, 2/1, not bad. It's a dinosaur. Basically gives you this weird protection from Wrath. When it dies, you can flash in dinosaurs and they fight things until end of turn. Not sure if this is where dinosaurs want to be. Usually you want to spend your early turns ramping, but it's not that far below the curve, and it has a really interesting ability. Swift Warden gives you a way to protect your Merfolk. Also, 3/3 for 3 is not bad. Flash it in, hexproof it to fizzle a removal spell. And then Sky Marcher Aspirant, really key for vampires, giving them another aggressive 1-drop. Ignore the Ascend ability. Maybe you turn it on eventually and it has flying, but even as just a Savannah Lions, it is a great option for aggro vampire decks that were missing another 1-drop. Deep-Root Elite gives Merfolk another option in the 2-drop slot. So 2 mana, you get a 1/1. Whenever another Merfolk enters the battlefield under your control, you get to put a counter on target Merfolk you control. So you can keep growing your Deep-Root Elite, or you can grow your other Merfolk. The interesting part about Deep-Root Elite is that it doesn't say when you cast a Merfolk. It's whenever a Merfolk enters the battlefield under your control. So if you cast a Merfolk and trigger Deep-Root Waters, you get 2 counters on things, essentially, because you have 2 Merfolks entering the battlefield. Also works really well with Herald of Secret Streams, which cares about counters being on things. So I think Deep-Root Elite is in the conversation for the Merfolk 2-drop slot. I think it ranks ahead of Deep-Root Champion, which suffers from the fact that Merfolk decks often are playing a lot of creatures and not as many non-creatures, so it's hard to grow a Deep-Root Champion in a Merfolk deck, but I think Deep-Root Elite probably ranks behind Merfolk Branchwalker and behind Merfolk Mistbinder, so we'll have to see how the tier deck of Merfolk shakes out. I think that Deep-Root Elite is good enough to be in the conversation. Whether or not it actually ends up having a slot in the final version of the deck remains to be seen. Rekindling Phoenix snuck in later in the day, giving us another mythic. So many mythics today. So 4 mana, you get a 4/3 flyer. When it dies, you get a 0/1 elemental that you sacrifice on your next upkeep to get back your Rekindling Phoenix with haste. So it's basically really hard to kill forever. You have to kill the Phoenix and then kill the elemental before the next upkeep to really get rid of it forever or have graveyard hate. So this is the next in a long line of recursive Phoenixes. Akum Firebird, Magma Phoenix, Shard Phoenix. Phoenixes have been doing similar things for a long time, but I think that Rekindling Phoenix is probably one of the better Phoenixes we've seen in a while. It comes back for free, unlike, for example, Deathpack Angel, which kind of looks similar to Rekindling Phoenix, and that you get a token, you get the token back, so it kind of looks similar, but Rekindling Phoenix is way more aggressive. You don't have to spend a bunch of mana to get it back from a graveyard, plus it comes back with haste. The problem I see with Rekindling Phoenix is the competition in the red 4-drop slot is super intense. You got Chandra Torture Defiance, you got Hazaret the Fervent. Is it really possible that Rekindling Phoenix can beat out either of those cards for a slot in like Ramen on Bread? So I think it's a powerful card, it can be good, but I'm afraid we'll find that it's maybe the second or third best red 4-drop in the format, which might keep it from seeing too much play in Standard right away. We also got Profane Profane Procession, which is a unique enchantment. So for 3 mana, you get basically nothing. You get a legendary enchantment. However, you get the ability to pay 5 mana, including 1 white and 1 black, to exile a creature. Then if there's 3 or more creatures exiled with it, you flip it around to a land that adds a mana of any color, also can pay 2 white and black, and put one of the exiled creatures onto the battlefield under your control. So in the end, you can steal creatures. The downside is it's slow. The upside is you can play this on turn 3, and if you leave up all your mana, it is a way to answer Hazoret the Fervent. It is a way to answer the Scarab God, and then eventually you can even get those back with Tomb of the Dusk Rose. So we'll see if Profane Procession is fast enough. It seems like it can be powerful, but if you can just cast out something directly for 4 mana, I'm not sure it's worth taking off turn 3 to cast Profane Procession, then taking off turn 5 to exile something, when you have the option to just Ixalan's Binding for 4 mana all by itself, cast out for 4 mana all by itself. So, but this could be a possible option for dealing with some of the hard to deal with threats in the format. Protein Rider is super exciting. 3 mana, you get a 2/2 with Raid. It's a shapeshifter pirate. If you raid it, it enters the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, which kind of makes it reminiscent of Phantasmal Image. Phyrexian Metamorph is probably the best comparison as a 3 mana clone. Of course, you need to be in Grixis colors to really make it work, I think, but if you can use this to copy your own Hostage Taker, that's a lot of value. Copy your opponent's Scarab God. 3 mana clones have potential to be very, very strong. So I'm definitely excited to try this in a pirate deck. Even just copying your own Kitesail Freebooter can be the right thing in some situations. And while a 2/2 for 3 isn't bad, if you don't have Raid, it's still a pirate body on the battlefield. So I could certainly see Protein Raider being part of the pirate deck in Standard. Finally, wrapping things up, we have some more commons and uncommons. Flood of Recollection gives us a way to get instants and sorceries back from our graveyard to our hand. Baffling End, some cheap removal. Dusk Legion Zealot, some vampire 2-drop action. I think that the best comparisons for these cards, Flood of Recollection is basically a budget Snapcaster Mage. You don't get the body, you don't get the tricks of blinking it or bouncing it back to your hand, but it is a way that you can essentially flash back an instant or sorcery card for just 2 mana. Baffling End is basically Silk Wrap, except instead of giving your opponent back the creature, if the Silk Wrap dies, you're giving them a 3/3 dinosaur token with trample. I think a lot of times that's fine, like compared to a Rogue Refiner, compared to a Whirler Virtuoso, I think you'd rather give your opponent a dinosaur than give them back the original creature. But the card I am most excited about out of this bunch is Dusk Legion Zealot, which is absolutely insane. It is basically the vampire version of Elvish Visionary, drawing a card, losing a life for just a single mana. This is a card that works great with Panharmonicon. It'll be a staple of Vampire Tribal. It triggers any enter the battlefield type stuff you have going on. This card is super, super good. It is one of the best cards they have spoiled in the entire set, even though it's just a common. Good for Pauper, good for Standard, good for Panharmonicon. I'm super excited for Dusk Legion Zealot. Finally, last but not least today, we have Radiant Destiny, which is kind of a twist on an Anthem effect. You gotta choose a creature type, gives those creatures +1/+1. If you ascend and have City's Blessing, they also have Vigilance. So this is kind of like a twist on Always Watching, where you need Ascend to really have the full effect. The upside of Radiant Destiny is it works with tokens, because you just choose a creature type. So there is a different restriction. It is still restrictive, but the restriction is a bit different. So it opens up some possibilities that weren't necessarily there with Always Watching. For example, Servos. A great possibility is to play this in Servos. Servos flood the board with creatures anyway to turn on Ascend, and then all your Servos are 2/2s. It's great in Vampires, where Vampires are able to make lots of tokens. Even could work in Merfolk, although I don't know if Merfolk want to go into blue, but Merfolk can go wide with Merfolk tokens. So choosing any of those creature types makes Radiant Destiny a potentially standard playable enchantment, and if you turn on Ascend, it is absolutely insane. So focus on getting lots of permanents on the board and choosing a good creature type, and Radiant Destiny can certainly be playable in Standard. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our daily Rivals of Ixalan spoilers for today. So many cards, so much to talk about. So what do you think? How good is Ezzor? Can it break into Standard, or is it just a commander card? How about Polyraptor? What other combos are there? Atlee, Primal Storm, Golden Guardian, World Shaper, Admirals Orders. So many cards. How about the tutoring cycle of uncommons? What's the best uncommon from today? The Merfolk cards, Rekindling Phoenix. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.